And next up, we have new business, master plan, conservation and development. I've asked Mike Rint to join us today and give us an update on where we're at. I think we're all aware that the plan of conservation needs to be updated by, Mike, when is that? End of this?
2 years.
In 2 years. So we're early on it. We have had a couple of productive meetings so far, but I thought inviting Mike in to kind of give us a little update would be beneficial. So Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, just very quickly, as you're aware, the mayor has a group put together to start this off, composed of Chamber of Commerce, we have Redevelopment, we have both Mr. Kimmel and Mr. Kites sitting in on the meetings, trying to get it off the ground, basically see what we have, where we want to go with it. So what we're in the process of doing now is essentially going through the plan, see what's been done, so you don't have to deal with that. I think it's pretty much an agreement that with the $50,000 that we have for consultants' fees, clearly that'll probably take off in the fall. One of the keys, someone asked, well, why aren't we going out to neighborhoods right away? If it's 2 years from now, you can't start poking at neighborhoods. You really need to have a more concentrated effort for this. And you should have that consultant on board. So we're in a pretty good place now as far as getting it off the ground. It is a long process, no question.
Can I ask, what is the role of the consultant going to be?
But essentially, the last time the consultant was basically putting the plan together. All of the sort of background work, neighborhood meetings were done by the planning commission. They gathered all the information, and then the consultant came in and was sort of piecing it together and putting it in logical order.
Do you think 50,000 is going to be enough?
Been around long enough, you work with what you have. Clearly, my suspicion is we'll ask for the council for more money.
Yeah, I think
the next budget
cycle.
cycle. Yeah, but there's nothing to say that we can't get started with.
And Mike, what did it cost us last time around?
Well, last time it was a little bit different situation in that we had a large number, as Diane alluded to, of mini master plans. We had the Mid-Harbor plan, we had the Main Westport Avenue plan, so we had a bunch of plans that are listed in the back of this, and there were a tremendous amount of them. So those were taken out of another budget, and it wasn't ours. So realistically, probably 150,000, but it was a different type of plan.
It's more of let's say an update now versus a full.
Well, they're all updates because we had one before. It really depends where the city and planning commission and everyone wants to go on it. Do we, the conversation was had, do we toss this out entirely? People were very concerned about, someone saying that this is just a wish list. Well, yes and no. Would you like to get to all these things? Wish we could. Clearly you're not going to. But it does give you essentially a roadmap. There's been criticism of the plan that it doesn't give you enough specifics as to what each department should be doing, short-term, medium-term, long-term. And so that's probably a fair criticism, but somehow that has to be turned into dollars, that has to be turned into capital for each of these departments. So if this plan comes in and sets short-term goals for each department, you take 2 from historical, 2 from Parks and Rec, some from DPW. All of a sudden, if we don't fund those, that sort of goes out the window. But it is a good idea. It makes sense to have some priorities in there. You need to have it. We do have priorities, but they're not dedicated towards each department. I think the mayor really wants to put a push on departments to say, what are you doing that goes along with this master plan? Clearly, you're doing roadways, you're doing park improvements, you're replacing playgrounds. That's all part of this. But should there be more emphasis on, as someone brought up, historical commission? Should they be doing more in the way of following the plan of development?
Okay. And during this process, I'd love to have you come back and give us updates in the next year or so and where we're at.
Sure. I'll see you in a year.
Yeah, I'll see you in a year. We're only that easy.
Yeah, and I don't think, obviously we're going to have a few more planning commissioners in the next month or so, and So all of that plays into when this gets off the ground.
Right, we've had some good conversations already in these 2 meetings.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I think, finding pockets in Norwalk that we could use, and, a lot of folks here with issues with certain, current, uses around Norwalk, and addressing those, and maybe finding better places for them, so these couple meetings have definitely been, worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, there was a big question about, the TOD, what are we doing over in East Norwalk between Starfolino Bridge and East Avenue? That was brought up at the meeting, that's a good point. Should that have a higher priority than some of the other things? You have to go back though and think, well, when this was done, we were in '08. If you look at what West Avenue was back then in '08, there was nothing happening there. So, I think it was targeting that area first before we move on to what we see now.
And Tim, if you don't mind, do you mind getting everyone on the committee a copy of the plan?
Sure.
That'd be great. I have one already.
And I have one.
Oh, you have one. Good. You get, all right, forget it.
Travis,
All right, Travis, do you want it?
Yeah, I'll take
All
it.
right, so you, okay, great. Any other questions?
I don't want to ask for the committee, oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Kimmel? Yeah, let's see.
Did you call on me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. As one of the people who periodically call it a wish list, the key is not the word wish list, but the fact that what we're looking at now is to prioritize it more. And that's what was lacking in previous plans. And the other thing was, we really never answered it. If you would ask yourself after looking at the plan, well, where do we want to be in 20 years? You couldn't answer that question based on the plan, okay? And we're beginning to look at that. The one thing I did not fully understand, and I think not everyone does, is without having a master plan with that format covers every little thing under the sun, it'd be a little difficult for the planning commission to do its work. And in some cases, the zoning commission becomes the foundation for many of the things they do with their reviews. So to a certain extent, we're locked into that format. But I do want to say that I think the next master plan, from what I've heard from folks who work in City Hall and outside City Hall, that we are looking at the point you raised, Ms. Lightfoot, from East Norwalk train station, Winfield, Van Zandt, all the way to Liberty Square, that area. It's got to be looked at, and hopefully that'll be a priority in the next plan. As Mr. Reed mentioned, the working with the historical commission and dealing with our history in a much more overt, proactive way. That's just two things. I think it'll be, in some respects, similar, but in many respects that I think it'll have more priorities, and you'll be able to understand where the city really wants to go for the next at least 10 years, but hopefully further.
I know we're a couple of years away, but you're laying groundwork now, and I never called it a wish list, but I also know it's a non-binding document. The courts approved that. It is an important guidance book to use and try and move forward on. The best that you know. Most plans are good for 3 years. Get to 5, a little dicey. Get to 10, it's really, you're throwing it for the win, but you're trying to achieve the end game. And I would agree with what Mr. Kimball said, in the sense of that one of the items that the last one tried to get to, but this one, especially if they're asking department heads, that they really prioritize. If Parks and Rec has 5 projects on its list, it really wants, what's its A game one? And then it'd be nice if they can incorporate into the next one the roadblocks beside money. Well, I'm saying, sometimes I want X in this particular area, okay, but nobody says, oh, by the way present zoning works, blah, 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 the way it says Connecticut works, you would need blah, 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 blah. And that may steer you away from what I think happened in the last one. It got to be so vanilla-ish that the big picture was out there, but no way, like I said, everybody was like running for cover, that we knew, unless the city was supporting, or government was supporting any kind of thing at that time, nobody was gonna build anything.
Right. It's a tough time to have a master plan come out.
Yep.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, and, but I think if you get some of those connect the dots, like, if you do this, you need to do the following. and if they can prioritize, would certainly help to pick out and stay focused, because there is a tremendous amount of, there's more public demand money in a master plan than there is ability for any agency or even government to supply the money. So that's why I think those priorities always come a lot more into play. Not this past master plan, the one previously, we're going way back. One of the things I at least admired that was attempted with that, they had a lot of working groups they brought in. They brought a representation like from the hospital, and they married 7, and they mixed them in with people from, Rowayton and blah, 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 all those kind of, to South Norwalk, to whatever, sit at the same table, so you had a mix of people.
It was a roadshow, yeah.
And they actually had some very good breakout roundtable groups, and I think some good discussions, because sometimes somebody comes in with a BLT comes in with a focus on one thing, it's density and how much can I get out of this and how much can I extract out of it, versus somebody living in a neighborhood, as we're hearing tonight, and saying, hey, we have our own issues going on. And I think those are important things to try and work into a public document
Yeah, I think
like
the
this.
planning commission is very much aware how each neighborhood is different from each other. And we do have those residential neighborhoods, and they all have different needs, even though they may first glance look to have the same requirements. It's not the case.
Well, I don't know if to talk about this now, I'll wait till POD, it's kind of combined, but it's a more specific usage. Because a lot of time the push is to change zoning in areas. You never see an area you want to change back to a single-family zone or a 2-family zone from a multiple-family zone. I'm just trying in the back of my head, because I want to talk about this later. Take like a Golden Hill area. It was originally single-family zone. Somewhere after, in the 40s, they went in the 50s, they decided to take portions of it and change it. Is there more, and I'm thinking strictly from a property tax, because that's how the city extracts its value out of its community to pay for all the services provide that. If you went backwards, do you increase the value of the property by recreating neighborhoods where there wasn't single-family neighborhoods?
So
And that can be
instead-
from, off of Chestnut Street and all those kind of things, that those were all single-family homes, or, up to the hill, as we call it, down there, or Whistle Village used to be called, when I grew up, that's what they called it, because of the train whistles, but, no, I was not around for steam engines, okay. But I heard stories of them collecting coal along the tracks during the Great Depression,
That's
trying to
my
keep their
father,
homes,
yeah,
but,
yeah.
I wasn't around. Yeah, I wonder sometimes if you create these pockets of growth inside of areas like that, you better rise the whole boat around it and increase values, increase the sense of neighborhood. Because sometimes all this high-density housing issues work against trying to create, depending on how big it is, don't work toward everything, trying to create a community. for
Yeah,
that
I
community.
haven't seen it where someone's come in and said, I've got 8 units here, I'd like to make it 2.
No, I know.
Up and down the block. It goes to be.
No, but I'm just talking about incentives or whatever it means, does it make sense, though?
Right.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm just speaking out loud with not coming here that I read an article on.
Yeah.
But sometimes I wonder as I drive through some of these neighborhoods that originally were single-family homes and suddenly they're discombobulated and got 5 units. Somebody took a staircase, moved it here and made 5, took the bedroom and made it a unit, lived in one of those. I'm just wondering if there's, and that's what I'm gonna ask him when we get to it, because that's one of the things I'm kind of curious about, whether anybody's going reverse. That's all. Thank you. Thank you for all your good works for over the years.
Okay.
Anybody have any other questions for Mike? No? Mike, just quickly, the approval process for the master plan, if you could, during this time, maybe review it, and if there's any ways to improve on the approval process of it.
Well, it's a multiple public hearings. So it's not something that, we're gonna have one night of public hearings. It's gonna be extensive neighborhood input, business, neighborhoods. Commission will, at the end of the day, clearly the planning commission will have to approve it, and then it gets sent up for your review and the mayor's review. So
Any recommendations on how to?
well, I don't think you wanna, I think you'd like to keep those separate. I don't think you want to add one big public hearing between planning and the council, because they do have separate roles in it. Normally, I mean, I've been through a few of them. Not the big issue as far as timing goes. We have a tremendous amount of meetings. We hold the public hearings at the end. We take in what they say. Commission votes and then sends it on. So
Sends it to the planning commission, then following the
planning commission,
and the
then
council.
then
and
sends
the
it to
mayor.
council, yeah.
Okay. One more thing, I know Mr. Hempstead had done it through the last, during the last council. If you can give this committee, if you don't mind, that email with all projects and where they're at, and
Oh,
what's,
sure, we have,
I know it comes out quarterly, I
we
believe.
got a quarterly report, it's on my desk. I've got some work to do on it.
It's a lot of work, I'm
But
sure.
we'll get that out.
Yeah, if you don't mind just sending that to the committee, because, several have asked, and I'm actually interested as well to see it.
Yeah, essentially it gives you a list of what we have ongoing, under construction, approved, denied, type of thing.
Great. All right.
Thanks for the reminder.
Thanks, Mike.
Comments? Just to answer your question, because I was on this committee when we did the last one. A lot has to do also with the chair, because we got bogged down in the last one, and Chairman Bolton, Reverend Bolton was the one who moved it along. It's like anything, as we went through the 95/7 project down there, that where there's a will to have multiple meetings to get things done, you can get it done within a year. There was a chairman that just dragged it out. And Reverend Mulligan, I think we got it done like in about 6 months, 7 months, we were done. So, I mean, a lot has to do with leadership in this, that it's not trying to railroad anything too, but it's trying to make sure that there's a reasonable amount of time allocated to it. I won't mention any names, not in the council, but you know, same one who killed 95/7.
Okay, all right, any other questions for Mike? No? All right, thank you, Mike, you have a good night. All right, next up,
He's up already.
Travis, can I just ask you to move your bottle a little bit? Or is
It's
that
your
mine?
bottle.
It's my bottle. Thank you.
Tim has put together a fancy presentation for everyone here. Go ahead, Tim.
Committee members, tonight before you is the South Norwalk TOD redevelopment plan. Obviously, it's not the first time that it's come before the committee. The committee's had this plan and has been in the process of reviewing it since May 7, 2015. And on April 7, 2016, we held a public hearing on it, and you can see the list of meetings that you've had between 2015 and 2016 that have dealt with this specific issue. The plan has also been before the Mayor's Zoning Task Force for most of last summer, and it also has had a public hearing with the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency. There's been a joint meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on June 7, 2016, and there have been two public information sessions in the plan area, one on June 16th and one on June 29th. This evening's review, and I'm going to go exceedingly fast, and I'll leave it up to you to slow me down in areas that you want to spend more time on. We're going to define redevelopment, what redevelopment is all about, and what a redevelopment plan specifically is. Lead into the review of the TOD redevelopment plan, the areas of the plan that deal with the current plan area and the potential to expand that area as discussed in the public participation component, the purpose and goals of the plan, the implementation initiatives associated with it, and the proposed design guidelines. So what is the redevelopment all about in terms of what you're trying to accomplish? It's a process to rebuild and restore an area in which there's some level of measurable state of decline and disinvestment or abandonment. The redevelopment may be publicly or privately initiated. Over the past few years since the Reed-Putnam Urban Renewal Plan and the investment associated with that, the redevelopment initiatives in Norwalk have been more privately initiated, although the plans have been have come forth from the redevelopment agency. But as I said, it's commonly recognized as a process governed by the local redevelopment and housing laws and undertaken in accordance with a redevelopment plan, ultimately that requires your legislative approval on behalf of the municipality. And if used correctly, the redevelopment can transform a distressed area into an economically viable and productive part of the community. So that's what redevelopment is all about. Now what specifically is the plan about? It's a real estate development document. It conveys to the public the city's specific real estate development goals and objectives for a geographic area based on uses, density, and design. It empowers the redevelopment agency to implement the plan, recognizes in accordance with state statutory provisions and findings. It responds to and is informed by existing land use policies, ordinance, and regulations that govern development within the redevelopment area. That's a very important point. You can't have a redevelopment plan that is independent of the existing land use policies of the city. It communicates approved land use policies to the public. It examines the potential of new development through the lens of land use by specific reference, and its implementation objectives are limited to the statutory powers conveyed to the redevelopment agency. What a redevelopment plan is not. A redevelopment plan is not a municipal housing document, although the redevelopment agency is in support of the city having a comprehensive housing document for the entire city. You don't have housing plans for specific neighborhoods. You have them as a housing plan for your municipality. A redevelopment plan is not isolated from the existing land use policies, ordinances, and regulations that govern development within the city, and it's not a wish list of contemplated or desired social policies. What is TOD? Just to keep everybody focused, this is a TOD redevelopment plan. It's centered around public transit, as we've been discussing for months. In this case, it's the South Norwalk Railroad Station. And what you try to accomplish is having safe, walkable, and bike connections to the transportation hub, and encourages around that hub higher density, lower parking ratios, and mixed-use development in close proximity. So now getting into the redevelopment plan itself in terms of what it does, it meets the requirements of the enabling legislation, Connecticut General Statutes, Chapter 130, Section 8-127. Those are the requirements that the plan has to meet under the state statutes. We have reviewed that with you, and this plan does meet those requirements. The plan has been available for public comment since April 2016, and it's advancing now to the Common Council for approval, should you advance it this evening. I do want to take a moment to actually indicate back to the committee, we've constantly been in this situation of having to have the legislative body undertake a blight finding for these plan areas. The state statute is woefully antiquated in this regard. And what it uses as the measurements of blight are difficult for any legislative body, much less the residents that are in the area that's being contemplated for a redevelopment plan to digest, in terms of having to indicate that, no one wants to indicate that a part of their city is blighted, and nobody wants to say that they live in a blighted area. In that regard, I've had some initial discussions with the Regional Plan Association, and I want to commit to the committee that the redevelopment agency intends to work with RPA and other redevelopment entities across the state to try and work with our elected officials in Hartford in revising the state statute, so that we're, in terms of dealing with a redevelopment plan, we're more focused on the how the plan responds to specific life conditions and processes that challenge the living environment in the redevelopment plan area, and how it can be made better, as opposed to the outdated definitions that currently define blight.
Tim, let's go back. Real basic question. Why is it necessary that we comply with the state law? I mean, couldn't we just decide as a city to change the zoning in an area?
Your power in this regard flows from the state to the municipality. And quite frankly, it starts at the federal government, flows to the state lets it flow down to the municipality. So you can't have a situation that the municipality is operating independently of the state statute with regards to this, because that would make the plan challengeable, legally challengeable.
I mean, to do a TOD, but what if we just wanted to change the zoning in this area without?
Oh, to change the zoning?
We wouldn't need to comply with this, right?
I
I mean, if you were taking a whole, I'm not saying we do this, I'm just trying to understand it. I mean, could you not achieve the same objective by just changing all the zoning here?
No, because the plan's a little broader than just the zoning. For example, there's some requirements that come back in the plan to the developer that's actually indicating, what you're looking for development, even though it's met with the requisite zoning.
So like your design guidelines and that type
That's
of stuff,
correct. Right.
that helps me, thank you.
Right. But I think all of you will agree that those votes in terms of findings of blight are difficult for all of you, and as it is for the people that live in the neighborhood. So hopefully we can make some inroads on that. But the redevelopment area does meet those objectives, but the other issue is that it's not necessarily the standard definitions of what a layperson would consider as blight. It's incompatible land uses, it's existing environmental conditions that cannot be addressed by the private market alone, and in this particular case, there's flooding conditions that can't be addressed by the private market alone. The proposed plan will materially improve the conditions by providing development incentives to address existing conditions of blight over time. It will replace the incompatible land uses by infill development, and obviously the proposed modifications that we have associated with the zoning, rehabilitate existing older housing stock by infill development, address flood conditions with appropriate building and site design guidelines for new development, and protect historic buildings. Plan findings, again, the sufficient housing exists for relocation. Changes in the area, again, we're not going in and doing eminent domain and taking the wholesale parcels and putting them into play for development. At this time, we're not anticipating that the plan is going to use eminent domain. We haven't listed any properties for specific acquisition, so the issues and challenges associated with relocation are minimal in terms of this plan, and the plan has met the requirements in terms of ensuring that sufficient housing exists for such relocation that would be anticipated under the plan. Proposed zoning for the TOD district requires the replacement of existing workforce housing, which is in the city's ordinances in terms of zoning, in the new development at 50% of the state median income as defined by Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G. Additional workforce housing units will be required up to the currently required 10% and must be provided at 80% of the median income, again, as defined by 8-30G. I'm happy to come back to this if folks have a question as to how that's all working, because that was a lot of information in a very short couple of sentences. The proposed redevelopment plan is consistent with the city's plan of conservation and development. It supports the POCD goals for economic development, affordable housing, transportation improvements, historic preservation, and urban design. Coming to the issue of the current plan area, up on the screen you'll see the map of what we have intended as the redevelopment plan, or the TOD redevelopment plan area. And to the north, at the very north, that's North Main Street, coming down along what would be the left-hand side of the slide. That boundary is Martin Luther King Boulevard. All the way to the right is Water Street, and all the way to the south is basically coming to Bell Avenue. That is what is currently anticipated as the TOD plan area. There has been comment about expanding the plan area. The area in pink is what is being considered as the expansion area, and obviously that is contiguous with what we have as the current plan area. This area was looked at rather extensively by the redevelopment agency, but it was determined that we would not include it in the redevelopment plan at the time and look at it as a separate study area. And I'll have Susan speak to the objectives of that particular study in a moment. But if you look at the zoning in that area, especially along the I-1 zone and the neighborhood business, you have lots that are basically two zones, and that's a bit problematic, and we might want to be looking at corrections according to that. But Susan, can you bring the committee up to speed on what the original concept was in terms of the village district zoning for this area and what the objectives of the plan were?
Yes, we had originally, do you want me to, do you want to move up to your?
Yeah, it'd be helpful.
Tim, you just mentioned something about the area I-1 was a two-zone?
It's a split zone in terms of property. See, all of these lines here, where this, well, I can't see it because I'm standing in front of it. Where that red line is,
Yeah.
those are individual lots, and those lots are all split zone.
Okay.
The agency had initially worked with the Springwood Whistleville area along Lexington Avenue under a very small and focused grant given to us by the State Historic Preservation Office in the course of 2015 to look at how to take what is a pretty substantially intact neighborhood and look at preservation strategies for that neighborhood. It was, as I said, it was a very small study, it was very focused, involved a lot of the contributions of the individual property owners as to how they might address that. The various implementation strategies that this particular study looked at were how these individual property owners of historic properties might access tax credits, for example, how they might apply for either state or national registry status, and then seeking a remedy to protect themselves against this encroachment of incompatible uses. They were potentially seeking village district zoning. The study really concluded with the looking at these options, some of these options, any package of these options might be appropriate for this area. But coincidentally, and perhaps actually in a favorable context, a lot of issues have arisen over the last 6 to 8 months that really caused a lot of focus on the findings of the study that did look at incompatible uses. And a lot of these incompatible uses are functions of the fact that some of these properties on the street frontage are in one zone, and then in the back lots are another zone altogether, which is an odd situation for a property owner, but it does allow for this encroachment of incompatible uses to become legal.
So just to clarify, Susan, maybe the audience, so by including this additional, to expanding TOD to, say, the Amic property and the surrounding streets would stop these unwanted uses from expanding?
Yes,
Correct.
because they would now be included under a comprehensive TOD district zone that would not allow these incompatible uses, grandfathered indeed.
Right, let's be clear
under the
that
zone.
They're
they
grandfathered.
would all be
Yes.
grandfathered, but they wouldn't be allowed to expand beyond their current footprint.
So they couldn't buy the lot across the street to expand their business eventually?
But to follow up, if you were to include this new district, would you also, would it be consistent with what the draft plan has now for that district in terms of historical significance?
Yes, I think the TOD district is quite open about how historic preservation is a stated goal. The proposed zoning for these adjacent neighborhoods reduces a lot of the height that might be allowed in the core area around the station down to a more modest and appropriate.
Just to review that point, as you probably remember when we were talking about the various issues for density, after you passed Henry Street, the density went way down to 3.5 stories. I want to say it was, I think it was 30 feet, 3.5 stories. And obviously, you know, we've looked in the TOD plan area at varying level of density, with the higher density being primarily closer to the commercial areas and the railroad station, and then tapering down significantly into the neighborhood, and that would obviously be the case in this area, as there's a lot of single family and 2 to 3 family housing that's there.
So if we were to vote and approve this tonight, that would include the expanding of TOD?
We would incorporate it into the plan, yes.
I'm sorry, just to follow up on that, since you said you have done all the tapering down to the border of that, of the existing, how does that automatically translate into the new district?
Yes, we would basically incorporate that as the neighborhood to the south of where we've had the higher densities to the north. So in other words, north of Henry Street, coming back up to North Main Street, we have higher densities. After you hit Henry Street, you have lower densities, and we would continue with the lower
When you
densities.
determine that that's suitable for that and appropriate for that separate,
Yes.
the new district?
Yes, you wouldn't want to be going 65 feet.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, because it's sort of, it's a last minute thing, and I'm wondering, have you had time to consider that? I think it's just a real question.
We, as I said, we actually contemplated putting this area into the plan at the outset, and then because of the availability of the funding for the grant to do the study, and the thought that you could ultimately get at least some level of improvement to the district through the historic preservation program, we decided that it probably would be best if you went to the village district zoning for this and had it operate under the separate study. But again, we spent some time with this at the outset, so it's not like it's something
Well, I'm
that
sorry,
was
what's
more-
changed then? If you thought that way beginning, it would be better under village district, why do you now think it'd be better under this?
Well, I think the community has first of all come forward in our public comment and indicated that there's and that they're absolutely correct, there's a higher degree of protection for the neighborhood under the TOD plan than they would be getting under the historic program.
Does this change, is this consistent with the idea behind creating village districts? What is, other than the zoning issues, what would make this, what would be the rationale for making this a village district, other than the
I'll
zoning?
leave that to you, Susan.
None, really. I mean, the village district is a zoning principle.
But based on a certain history and a variety of other factors, not only zoning, not only zoning.
Well, I think the housing inventory itself was bringing back the issue of the village district zoning and the preservation of that, the historic nature of the housing that's there.
No, now you're talking a little differently. You're talking about the I'm not familiar with the historic nature of the housing. But if there is.
I'm not an expert in that field, but
Yes, but if there is a unique character of that particular area, there must be something because of the zoning problems.
I believe that the Historic Commission believes that there is a high degree of historic character in the housing inventory that is in that area.
It doesn't overflow into the areas where the zoning is a little more consistent with what we're used to? Or just, is this really a clearly defined area?
It's a very defined area.
That's fine, it's fine.
The housing there was.
Actually, can you give the parameters of the village district area? Is it all of what's here?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
In terms of the study area, is it the entire area that's in the pink now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the properties are predominantly small properties. They're predominantly single to 4-family houses. They were predominantly all constructed within approximately a 30 to 40-year period between 1880 and 1920. They share a lot of common characteristics. They were predominantly a population of a particular immigrant group. The immigrant group has changed over time. They started out Hungarian, German, and they morphed into Italian, and then they morphed again into, now there's a large Hispanic population there. But they haven't changed much in that period of time, so they do share a lot of historic characteristics. There are very few large properties there, which is our interest in trying to protect these characteristics. This is typical of the Amex situation, which you've seen. You have to accumulate more than one or two properties. You actually have to start kind of really growing into the neighborhood in order to get the kind of acreage that you need for those kinds of uses. So this is the reason that we felt that it was appropriate to be considering this neighborhood.
And we've seen with Amic, he's purchasing, multiple properties.
Oh, yeah, you
already
have to
down there.
because they're so small. I mean, we looked at this and for example, of these properties, only 22 parcels are more than a quarter of an acre. And of those, only 6 are larger than a half an acre, and there's only 1 that's over an acre. So this neighborhood can only be gobbled up by the accumulation of property. And so the intention is to prohibit that expansion of these inconsistent uses as being the strategy for protecting.
The other issue in terms of this particular area is the existing multifamily structures that are in the area. And I'm talking structures that are more than 15 units are not contributing positively to the neighborhood. If anything, they're a negative influence on the neighborhood. And being able to impose the requirements of the redevelopment plan on transactions associated with those multifamily units can only be helpful.
I don't want to drag this.
So
Yeah, I got a couple, but let's back up procedures so I understand this. That's a pretty large area. So, is it a better process, understanding why we should move forward with adding that area in, to adopt what's been proposed and had multiple public hearings on, and then immediately start a process on this area? Because you would have to, I would think you'd have to kick back the public hearings again, because this is a significant landmass add-on. This isn't like you want more street, yeah, it's to throw in another street. I'm just trying to figure out how not to slow this down, but make sure that that stays focused on, is it, I guess I'm trying, what's easier? What is,
Well,
easier is the wrong word I'm looking for. I guess, what is better utilization of time? Is it better to get this done and then, that's up to the chairperson, not me, but I mean, obviously, or to get done on this area and have those discussions about a village district and trying to incorporate that? Because there are certain protections, but historical is not necessarily the guidance behind the village district either. It's more of a character issue than it is a historical issue. Getting that area involved,
Again, there, and you've been involved in as many of them as I have. You can certainly modify a redevelopment plan at any point in time.
Right.
If the committee's uncomfortable in terms of taking this dramatic step, because you're absolutely right, it is a pretty significant land area. And then, getting this piece approved and then coming back with the consultation with the planning commission and the underlying points as to why this area should be brought into the TOD district, we can certainly do that and have it as a subsequent amendment.
There, to my follow-up question, to me asking, as you mentioned, all small parcels, and you also said the 15. You said a 15 unit is more detrimental to the area than it is positive. But then, could somebody and I don't know. I'm just trying to sort of quick down and dirty. That's why I want to know whether that needs a little more time. Under this plan, as existing, if you just added the areas, could somebody walk into that particular district, that area, accumulate 20 properties? So somebody got 4 acres. And then,
With the multifamily?
Yeah, I'm talking about
The issue with the multifamily is that there is such a high penalty onto a developer that in terms of if you're taking existing units out of service to put those units back into service, you're going down to the 50% state median income in terms of those units. So the likelihood that you're going to take any massive number of existing units out of service is probably unlikely. What you're going to want to do is to actually preserve those units, improve the units, and ultimately and not have to have that impact in terms of your redevelopment costs.
Okay, so you're thinking this is more, there is not an ability to accumulate and then suddenly,
Well,
You're looking at-
that's the whole issue that we were very concerned about, was that, okay, we didn't want to have a situation where what is considered basically de facto affordable housing all of a sudden got eaten up by by developers acquiring, 3 to 4 family housing, and then all of a sudden, much less like the developments that are in and around the train station, like Bell, that you have over 15 units, and all of a sudden all of those units are taken out of service.
how about in the case of the commercial units that put this into play for discussion? If somebody wanted to develop,
You could develop those as multifamily housing, yes.
could it be
But you would ultimately have to stay within the guidelines. As I indicated, we would want to have the density down there be at the lower level, not the 5-story, 65 feet maximum that we have in the plan. So you would be at 3.5 stories, which is fairly consistent with the heights of a 3-family house
in that particular area?
in that area. We would look to have that for the.
Okay, so what I'm saying is you went to the other guidelines.
Then there
Well,
was-
that's why I'm asking the question.
You would definitely be out of character with everything that's around you at that point.
Can you say other guidelines, what are you referring
Well,
to?
if you go up to Washington Street guidelines.
No, that was,
I'm just saying, you go to the other parts, as you suddenly can have a 6.5 story building, basically, high density, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. I wanna make sure we look, personally, I just wanna make sure we're doing the right thing. I think we're headed to the right thing, I think it's the right thing to do, but I wanna make sure that we don't, because we rush into something, we miss like, what if?
And in the
And because I think we asked the neighbors down there, do you mind a 7-foot story building that's suddenly gonna have 200 units in the middle of, I'm not sure that would go over well as an alternative to
Can I
what
ask
you
the
got.
question, the same question slightly differently?
Yeah.
What are the advantages of including this
Huh?
property now?
Well, again, to come back to the point previously, though, that this was clearly discussed as part of the community dialogue, and the agency certainly put forward that we could take this up as a subsequent amendment. The concern with the community is that, they're feeling encroachment issues happening today, and this plan is advancing now, and their thought was, if we're going forward, why wouldn't we try and get this addressed today, so that at least there was a firm commitment from the city that this was the direction that we were going, and that this area would be in the plan. But the benefit associated with it is ultimately exactly what the Amic karting issue was, is that once the plan's adopted, you can't expand beyond what you have currently. You could.
So if I may interrupt, so if we approved tonight to include this piece of property, does that automatically protect that property? That AMEC cannot expand?
It would go into the plan area, yes.
And then AMEC cannot expand?
We would ultimately refer that before the agency approved. It would have to go back to the zoning commission, because they provided, well, they haven't yet provided comment to the council. But we would advise them that you're including this into the TOD plan area, and if they had comment, they would have to get it back to you.
So,
John, you done?
Then continue.
no, it's okay, I'm just trying to understand. But you said pre-existing use, so whatever is approved currently by zoning and how they bought the property, they could still do as is provided by now.
And they could sell to somebody who was gonna do the same kind of
Correct, so
use.
this doesn't stop them from using what is presently zoned.
But
And now you concern me too, because I
if
thought we
there
were
was a
beyond that
change,
point.
as you know, Doug, if there was a change in use, you can't go back to the other
Right,
use.
right.
And, you know, you can't expand the footprint, which is, and we've heard this in terms of the community meetings that we've been having. This is, you know, the expansion issue is a real concern within the community. And, you know, it clearly is your decision if you want to wait and do this as a plan modification and advance forward with everything that we've been studying and looking at for a long time, or if we want to actually redefine the boundaries and have it included.
If I may,
Well, I was just gonna, and I was at one of the meetings and I heard that sentiment expressed, so I hear that loud and clear. I just wanna go back to the village district, because you guys have clearly thought about that. I did see a draft report and a lot of work had been done on that, on the Cecil group actually, and I just wanna understand, would that same approach be followed under these guidelines? If you were to extend the current TOD district in, or you were to include that with it, would, and I know it won't be a village district, but you still, how do I say this properly, treat the housing stock the same way? Would you still promote that type of?
I think the issue that Susan was trying to convey back to you, to give you some assurance on that, is that historic preservation is treated as a priority of the TOD
I saw that in there.
redevelopment plan. And, you know, what we would be pushing back is that, you know, the vast amount of the inventory in that area obviously has got some historic significance. And, you know, again, the other issue is, from a development standpoint, when you begin to look at the equation of having, and again, there's so much of this that just comes down to math. You know, if you're doing parcel acquisition, and let's say that you're trying to get to, let's say for sake of numbers, a development that's 100 units, and you have to take, you know, 25 existing units out of play. Well, the plan's now telling you that those 25 existing units that you're taking out of service, you've got to bring down to an affordability level of 50% of state median income. Well, your numbers just blew up on your development.
can,
Correct.
yeah. Just looking, you know, at the numbers, the parcels that are in consistent use now, if this goes into the TOD, that inconsistent use is grandfathered.
Yes.
But I would think over time, as the area is developed, the property becomes less valuable in its non-conforming use. And at some point, that would make more sense for them to develop it into housing or sell it. Am I
You're
wrong?
absolutely right, and that's the whole intent of the entire plan area. When we're no longer utilizing eminent domain, we're really using incentive zoning to change uses.
Okay, any other questions?
That's right. There's something he mentioned, zoning commission has never commented on this at all?
We had a joint meeting with the zoning commission. The zoning commission hasn't put forward any direct questions to the redevelopment agency to respond to, other than what we responded to that night. And they had no specific comment relative to the plan. Mr. Davidson from the Planning Commission has expressed to us formally a question. We have a response prepared for him and the Zoning Commission with regards to density issues. I'm happy to review that question. But that has been the degree of response. You folks charged us with basically going back and consulting with the planning and zoning commissions with regards to the plan. We did that through the joint meeting, and to my knowledge, there has yet to be any communication of comment coming to the redevelopment agency from the planning commission with regards to the plan yet. But you have yet to formally take this up at the common council yet.
No, just to follow up, then, has the redevelopment commission itself seen the proposed extension of the area?
There's been a discussion within the commission about it. There's knowledge of it.
But no,
But there-
like tonight, nobody,
They would be getting it next week in terms of a specific discussion of it.
How soon, if I may, do you have a question? How soon, if we vote tonight to include that, is all that property automatically?
No, no.
So there's a process, I
Yes.
assumed that. How long would that process take?
Well, is.
Well, let me really ask the question. During that process taking place, would it create an incentive for someone with an inconsistent use to acquire more property faster?
Well, let me answer the process question first, and then you can infer whether it would be to
I want you to tell me. I don't
someone's
want-
benefit. But as we've been discussing, one of the issues associated with this plan is that we want to have the requisite zoning in place to support the plan. So after the council ultimately approves the plan in whatever form it intends to approve it, our first directive as the redevelopment agency would be to file the prospective zoning to support the plan. I'm of no illusion that the redevelopment agency is gonna have support for everything that it's anticipating in terms of its zoning recommendations, and I'm anticipating that that will be a work in progress with the zoning staff and the zoning commission. So the zoning's action with regards to the various zoning recommendations, once that is done, then the entire plan comes back to the redevelopment agency, and the redevelopment agency is the last stop in the process, and they will, once they take a vote, it will enact the plan.
Okay, if we approve it tonight, it goes to the council, it's approved of the council, then it's going to zoning, so this all could happen in a month?
Oh, no.
I'm trying to put some time around it.
I think in the best case, let's say that there was a discussion over the next 30 to 45 days with the zoning staff and members of the zoning commission as to, okay, we're comfortable with this 60% of what you're putting forward. And, we have tweaks here and there. And we can get that through the process in the next 60 to 90 days and enact that. I personally would take that as a big win for the plan, assuming that 60% had the major underpinnings that, in terms of the zoning, that were the important components of it.
Mr. Sims?
Yeah, Tim, you mentioned that by expanding this district down to Bell Street and Chestnut area, Amic purchased that property with the vision of expanding and also buying multiple properties and building upon that.
Them and others.
Right, correct. Having said that, by making this expansion and putting this that area part of the TOD plan, it does protect it. And I understand it's going to take probably some legal steps, if you will, before we get there. But I'm assuming that at some point, by making these changes here, that Amic they're going to be looking to cash out and maybe sell the properties. And if that is the case, will the redevelopment agency, would you actually purchase that property and kind of just protect it or actually build on that for low income housing there?
Obviously, we as we do purchase property to look at housing uses. If that property came to the market, given its location, I'm sure we would take a very serious look at it.
Just to follow up on the process question. So if the council approves it Tuesday and the zoning commission doesn't like your zoning changes, doesn't that kind of change the fundamental plan?
Well, I would assume that if there were, again, we've met a number of times with the zoning staff on the recommendations. We've also met, again, with the mayor's zoning task force over the course of the entire summer. And that's chaired by the current chairman of the zoning commission. And again, we had, a joint meeting with both the zoning commission and the planning commission. And I have to say that both commissions were highly engaged in terms of questioning, various aspects of the plan and the zoning. But there was nobody that was saying, this is completely ridiculous.
Yeah, I hear you say that, don't expect 100%, but we don't have another bite at the apple if for some reason they decided not to approve it, right?
Unfortunately, the redevelopment agency and the common council don't control zoning.
No, I understand that, but I don't know.
Unfortunately.
No, I'm just asking, why wasn't the zoning?
We tried.
You couldn't obtain the zoning.
And some will see that as a very good thing, though.
Yeah. But you couldn't obtain the zoning approval or tentative approval before we approve this, right?
Well, no, because ultimately, you're going into the zoning commission with a document that's been approved by the common council.
So it needs to work that
And
way.
that's giving at least some sense of
Guidance.
the cities behind the document.
Thank you.
Mr. Kimmel?
Yeah, just to your point, I think Tim is absolutely correct. What we have in front of us is kind of a joint effort. There's a lot of folks involved with zoning, planning and zoning, have been involved with this, and I don't expect anybody to be blindsided so late in the game. There's been so much discussion. I would get it, bet it'd be much higher than 60%.
I'm trying to be conservative.
Concerning the portion we're trying to maybe add in, the village district such approach you're talking about is not in this document?
No, because what we're looking for is a district zoning, comprehensive district zoning, not breaking it up into pieces.
So I'm just saying, we don't even have this before us for information exactly what we want to do this.
Oh, you do in terms of the
Overall.
The zoning for the entire district would be the same. And what I've indicated to you is that the density south would fall off from 5 stories, 65 feet to the 3.5 stories.
Correct, but is that in the language that's here now? If we just carte blanche just threw that on the map?
Well, the document that you have right now, it doesn't contemplate this because, again, this was an issue that just came forward. But we would certainly be able to make those modifications to the document, assuming the council is supportive of.
I'm going to express my own personal opinion. That's all I ever do anyhow. I'm overall. No, but I think there's got to be caution, because caution, I've learned over the years, I'm not trying to belabor this, because I think in the idea behind trying to change that area, from especially what's happened recently, certainly is something we should take a look at from this TOD plan. But this, the sword goes both ways. Sometimes you say, and I'm just thinking because I know people are here to support it, and I'm tentatively too, but sometimes they're like, oh, okay, we did it. Well then, next thing you find out, well, I didn't know they could do that in that zone. So I think it's proper that it should get at least some daylight on it in the sense of, and I'm not talking about taking a year or 6 months, I'm saying it's probably something that can be done in 30 to 60 days with a proper presentation, and just add it as an amendment to the thing, because you also want the commission, because you don't know where their feelings are, even though they've had discussions with it, they've never been formed, but it's like tonight, until tonight, we've never formally even had this thing to look at. This is all recent, that I think it's more important to get the TOD and to say, okay, now we understand this, we've had discussion, get something more formal into it, and say what the regulation, because you may want to adjust them even tighter. You may say, hey, you know, could somebody do X, like I was asking? Well, how do we eliminate that X variable from this new portion? So I'm just throwing the air of caution up, because sometimes trying to appease, sometimes you make it worse and not better in some cases.
By moving slowly, I would think the non-conforming, not inconsistent pieces to take action to protect themselves. So you would want to accelerate this process.
Well, and I'll, 60,
So correct me if I'm
how many
wrong.
years has this been here? I mean, you know, this has been like
Exactly.
3.5 years in the process. Well, this showed up tonight. I'm not saying, what I'm trying to, I guess, say though, in asking though, what they have is grandfathered. So whatever uses down there industrial wise he's got, and contractor yards wise he's got, he still owns those.
Yeah,
We're not changing, we're only changing if he sells the parcels or
but he
something.
could acquire more properties in the interim.
He still can, until zoning drops the regs, he can still do that. Doesn't make damn bit of
There's some
difference.
valid points on Mr. Sheehan, that this property, if we were to add this and vote on this tonight, and eventually the zoning were changed in the village district, that property would be more attractive, and perhaps Amic would sell down the road, and those other
Yeah.
uses that are unwanted.
Exactly, and
It's-
that's exactly probably what we want.
So, are there any more questions?
About
About
that parcel, right?
anything?
Yeah, oh, well, yeah, you were just stuck on this one. You mentioned somewhere, can you please point me to the exact wording that says, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
My concern is, and the previous council's been concerned about eminent domain being just in the hands of redevelopment, not out of elected officials. Can you point me to the exact section that says you were, because, what section? Because I looked at 6.4-1 and it doesn't say that.
Page 8. Well, let's see. Tim, I know, you do.
There's a variety of areas in the document that indicate it. And actually, it's under equitable development.
Which is section what?
I'm in the PowerPoint, Doug, I'm not in the document.
I'm sorry.
But there's a section that's dealing with equitable development.
The summary,
Just
isn't it?
pull the plan. That's so many changes.
It's page 4. Page 4?
This was implementation strategy.
What section?
Beginning summary.
Yes, page 4.
It's in how we respond to the goals of equitable development. Actually, do you have page 6?
I'm on page 4. 1-2 you're talking to, the purpose of the plan? There's a section that says reverse, under 6-41, I think.
You say this here, Tim. Nothing anticipating acquisitions. Later on, you use eminent domain, I know that.
It's, well, if you're looking at,
I know I saw it.
I know I can get the reference for you, Doug.
That's right, it's on page 6, it's acquisition of real property by eminent domain.
Acquisition of real property.
As authorized by section
8-127A.
8.27.
I'm sorry, what page was it?
6.
6.
Is acquisition of real property by eminent domain.
8-what?
It's authorized by
Acquisition and
127A.
domination, acquisition of rental property, acquisition of real property issued by the Borough of Redevelopment is authorized to undertake surveys. Plans for carrying out, I'm sorry, where are you? Were you seeing that?
Second point, second dot,
Second bullet.
second small bullet.
What
Yeah,
page,
it-
what page number is that?
That's a star.
Yeah, that's the point that Doug is actually coming back to, that it references that you actually, the statute has that power. He's actually looking for where specifically it says that we're not going to utilize the power. But I'll pull out the reference for you, Doug.
All right, being that
No, it's-
past ones,
I agree.
that it should be an
Oh, I'm
elected,
sorry.
elected body.
Is that yours?
We didn't want to take one person, one person, like another rich person richer.
Mr. Kimmel?
Before we go, I want to, a little bit, I don't have a vote on this, but I want to be clear. Let's go back to the village district if you don't mind for a minute. So right now you're dealing with a fairly large area that has inconsistent zoning, which we're not comfortable with. And we would like to figure out a way to have some kind of control and ultimately in the long run establish some consistency, which hopefully would be more residential. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the consequences, now, if we were to incorporate into the plan that we're sending to the council, the proposal for the village district. So, that,
Well, it's no longer, it would no longer be a proposal for a village district. It would be taking the area that was
Right.
proposed for the village district and incorporating that into the TOD plan.
okay, and what, okay, so, but it's part of the TOD plan. And once it's part of the TOD plan, we will have much more control over what is developed there.
Once the TOD plan is approved and the requisite zoning is approved, there would be stronger controls
Right.
in
Now,
that area, yes.
how would, so how would this, I mean, you're wondering about this is new, what ifs and things like that. Is there anything in particular that's different here other than inconsistent zoning? That there are what ifs that didn't exist in the other areas?
Well, I do have to say, I think that the residential inventory in this particular area is much more stabilized than the inventory in the original TOD plan area. I mean, adjacent neighborhoods around those I-1 uses are much more stabilized neighborhoods, and you need to, appreciate that as you're implementing the plan.
Which would make a stronger case to incorporate.
Well, you're asking what the differences are, and
Yeah.
that's one of the issues that
Well, at least to me, it would make a stronger case to incorporate so that we have
so you
control.
would be preserving it,
Yeah,
yes.
preserving it. So can you come up with any kind, in your mind, are there any big question marks? If we, I'm just thinking about getting it done now or going through a more detailed process. In your mind, are there any other issues that you foresee down the road that's unique to this area, which we haven't considered as we've been moving forward with this whole plan?
Well, it is there, I'll find the reference for it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, there's some characteristics, as we're talking about this, that are completely different for this area than they are for the TOD area, in terms of the inventory.
But the characteristics that you kind of talked about, for me, make a strong case to do what I think you're suggesting, that we incorporate. That's my conclusion. I can't see, I'm trying to think what could be certain problems that would be solved or something like that by spending, 3 or 4 months doing it. That's it, I'm trying to understand what would be a reason not to incorporate it. That's what I'm wondering about.
What you might get to is a better understanding of how you want to, rather than, and I'll use this as an example, and it's up to you to determine how you want to advance with it, but we could ultimately be looking at crafting certain components of the zoning recommendations to deal with this specific neighborhood as opposed to the whole TOD district. I mean, we might have some differing issues that are more specific to the uses that are there, as opposed to what we've already had as an inventory. We've been fully absorbed in for 2 years. We know what we want to change there, and I think we're much more guided in terms of those changes for the original TOD plan area than for this particular neighborhood.
Okay, that's true. I remember some of the detailed discussions of the other parts of the plan, and there's some unique things. that keep coming up, the deeper you look, so.
Other question?
Yeah, well, yeah, I just brought a couple notes so they can answer it. If not, I would, okay, we can talk about it Tuesday night, I guess this moves on, but I certainly would like to see some language in here that make sure the power of eminent domain outside of a public, especially outside of a public use, falls in the hand of the elected officials in the community, versus an agency.
And I agree with that,
He
too.
knows there's no offense or take with that.
And we discussed this earlier, so if,
We can
between
find it,
now and
we can have
Tuesday, if you
some
can give us that
language.
language.
Absolutely.
And if it is not in there, we could do, we can make that amendment on the council floor to change it.
Outside of a public use.
Just I know I have it as a reference in there because,
I saw it too, Tim.
in terms of dealing with equitable development, I mean, the first point that we make is that the plan does not call for the use of eminent domain. So
I think the language we had in the Uptown plan, I forget what we called it.
Wall Street,
Right, plan had it was very specific,
You
that
had
white
it
point
in
was
your
very
action.
specific, yeah.
it was in the
Right.
action that.
If we just go to page 7, real quick, I've got a couple of quick questions. Underneath the housing, residential, and the redevelopment, and it's maybe, you've got it worked in a document, without me going digging.
In zoning or this one?
I don't know, I'm going by page 7 in the little red, thank God they numbered these this way. No, the question is that, it doesn't seem, we're providing in one section, say zoning to allow non-conforming office or commercial use to go
Oh, here.
to housing. Now just kick back, is there anything in here that encourages development of incubator type commercial buildings? Because to be a viable neighborhood, you need everything, you need the transportation. you need-
there's nothing,
Well, this one seems to want to push that envelope the other way, so that's why I'm asking.
I'm sorry, you're on housing and residential?
Yeah, it says, provide zoning to allow non-conforming office or commercial use to housing. If housing is a hot market, then we're gonna gobble up the ability to have people
Right, but that's
live
saying-
and work there.
That's saying that the zoning, it's non-conforming.
Right,
So the commercial that's there is non-conforming.
right.
So if the new zoning is calling for housing in a particular area, then why would you want to have encourage non-conforming? But what we've actually done is in, major arterials, the plan actually encourages commercial
Right,
development.
that's what I'm asking. So is
And
there
we
a
actually-
balance here that
Yeah,
encourages the work
but
to work?
one of the issues.
And not work at retail.
And I know you'll remember this, in other plans, in other zoning actions that have been taken in response to plans. For example, the Wall Street area, there was a modification that ultimately required ground floor commercial uses to be on like Leonard Street.
Right.
And when you can't get ground floor commercial uses on your main arterials, which would be West Avenue and Wall Street in that area, why would you want to be encouraging commercial to come off of the main street?
This section here is the
Right.
moderate scale mixed use redevelopment.
And the other issue that the plan encourages is in terms of responding to the concerns for industrial uses. I mean, it does, as you recall, advance boutique manufacturing as a use
Yeah.
more broadly
Right.
within the district.
Just trying to create jobs that also
And that's an important point. I mean, I've been really clear with folks that, you can't have an urban core that only has two legs, which is, all housing, and now we're gonna have a substantial amount of retail, and not have some significant level of commercial and office.
Page 12, I am a little bit, I'm perplexed. Page 12, I think I understand the statement, I think I'm happy with the statement personally from trying to protect our marinas. but it says opportunities exist for residential hotel and other commercial development on the west side of Water Street, which is not on the plan. Enabling field view amenities to harbor and easy access to waterfront, that's capturing the benefits of waterfront location without encroachment on marine industries. I am confused because the west side puts it where the marinas are.
The east side.
East side.
I know that.
The plan area, Doug,
So you're saying the west side, okay, all right, that's
the
okay,
plan-
okay.
Just to be clear though, the plan area it cuts
Yeah.
Water Street and it stops
Right.
on the west side
Right,
of
got it.
water, leaving the east side for marine commercial.
Feel free to-
And I know you're happy about that.
Well, I think, look, Norwalk should be happy about that, because that water community that utilizes that harbor is really a reason people want to live here, go here, fish here. We got public docks, we got private docks. It's a wonderful world out there, and I just, you know, my biggest fear is somebody wants to come in, just rip all it up and put a nice high-rise, a Trump Tower with marinas. God forbid. Is there, and my last question, which I know Mr. Kiders would be extremely happy.
No, not at all, I'm enjoying it. Tom was telling me
Is, I know there's a push in this whole plan to go more for walkability, bicyclability and all that, which is all great when you've got a good mixed-use downtown, a real urban downtown. Is there a formula? Because the push is to push out parking. So I'm asking, is there a formula that says to be a self-sustaining, contained community? And I say, you know, and I don't know what the threshold should be. Is it 70%, whatever they figure it out to be? That you get enough people living within a 20-block area, then you can start tightening up on the parking, because you don't need, because South Dog would, that section of Washington with all the restaurant supports and that, would totally go belly up if we didn't have parking garages bringing people out to park. Because there's not enough people living within that area to support all that restaurant that's in there, a little more that's being proposed. So is there a formula
Well, you know,
for?
that's an interesting statement, because when you actually look at the residential development that occurred in the Washington Street corridor, that development occurred without having the requisite private parking to support those residential uses. And the big concern that I hear is that you have to have the private parking incorporated with the residential uses at the degree of the minimum standards, so that you don't have encroachment into the neighborhood. Well, you know, I think the Washington Street redevelopment effort actually proves that issue wrong, in so much as I don't think that the folks that are living on Washington Street are going up to Golden Hill to park. I think that they're finding alternative parking in the public parking resources that exist in the area. Now, you can have a debate as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because they're using a parking resource that otherwise would not be used. But you know, and what they can't get at the Haviland deck, you know, they're going to the Maritime Garage and/or buying permits over on the Webster Street lot for monthly parking.
Right, and that's what I guess that's what I'm driving at. Is there a formula that says, because the push right now is to try and reduce, and I get it, the parking requirements for those putting in either more kinds of units to push for more a walkable neighborhood and using mass transit. And I get all that, and I'm supporting that, but I need to I think it's important to understand what is the ratio, because if you suddenly throw X amount of square feet of retail or restaurant availability into these projects, can it still be self-supporting? Because, I mean, I go back, you're right with the restaurants that are down there too, but nobody was living in any of those units above it back in the 70s going into the 80s. Everything was empty down there. So it's a question of, and that's what I'm trying to understand, the push in this development is to try and move some of this going a little bit more south or into Webster Street. All right, which then gets the issue of what are you going to do with what happens to parking ratios there, because that is, the movie theater survives because of, I think, more Webster Street, because people we found out don't want to even walk up.
Well, 50 Washington Street survives because of Webster Street.
Correct. So I'm just trying to find out, is there Or can we find out from
But-
Cecil Group, is there
But-
a ratio that within half a mile, if you need X amount of residentials that will support X amount of, you know, so you can cut back on the parking? I'm not advocating more parking, I'm just saying, what is the, I guess maybe the other reverse, what's the point of refusal? That you've designed in more of X, but without Y, it can't support itself. You just wind up with empty storefronts.
Well,
I guess it's
the
more thing.
underlying issue with parking is ultimately the market, especially with residential units. And a developer is not gonna get financed without having the appropriate amount of parking to convince who's ever financing them that this thing's gonna work. And so, you know, zoning can have its requirements. And oftentimes, we've seen an issue, you know, previously when the 95-7 site was incorporating an office use, zoning was very aggressive in terms of getting the parking requirements down low. But the office user was saying, yeah, well, we really don't care, we want more parking. So, you know, you can have whatever requirements you want, but it all comes down to what the market is gonna accept. And, you know, I think the fundamental rule of thumb is that you have to have, we're not gonna be New York City ever. So, you're gonna have to have at least one parking space per unit. And, you know, now we're dealing with gradations of above one, you know, and the plan calls for 1.3. You know, so, you know, you can tinker around with that one way or the other, but, you know, in order to finance something in Fairfield County, you're gonna have to at least provide one parking space. And I don't think you'll get below that for a protracted period of time.
All right, I was just kind of curious, if you read part of this document that pushes one way, then there's the practical side of it.
You know, and just to add on to the discussion, I mean, some communities are now, instead of looking at parking minimums, they're looking at parking maximums and saying, you know, this is a wasted use of the valuable land commodity that's rare, especially in this neck of the woods, and it's probably the most expensive commodity that we have. We don't want to be using all of it for unnecessary parking. That, in some cases, you know, from 5 o'clock until, you know, 8 o'clock the next morning is vacant.
Just a quick, last summer or summer before last, I remember, I've been under the impression that we are going to be moving in that direction, where we will be using maximums instead of minimums. You just said other communities. Where do we stand on that at this point? Because I think it's a great idea.
I think we're standing at the point that we're at a threshold in zoning that has a parking minimum requirement, and the plan is trying to push down that minimum requirement. So we're still dealing with minimums.
Do you see any change in the future, or are you
I
discussing
think
it?
it's discussion, but I don't think that you can anticipate a change short term on that.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'm comfortable with moving this forward with the expanded TOD area. I'm gonna read the item. Actually, I'd like to make an amendment to the current language and then call for a vote. I'd like to amend the language to read, approve advancing the TOD district redevelopment plan and the recommended zoning to the common council. So basically, I'm just adding recommended zoning to the current language. So all in favor of the amended action item?
Wait a minute, are you making an amendment?
I'm making an amendment, correct?
So do we have any supporting documentation? Do we have a map?
The map of the area?
Yeah, is it in the new one you handed out tonight?
No, we have,
And are these different guidelines, or are these incorporating the entire guidelines? Because the streets aren't listed, nothing's listed. I'm trying to be cautious here for the right reasons, not the wrong
Yeah,
reasons.
no, I understand.
And I'm not comfortable really moving on with this section tonight as much as I am this
I understand.
package. I'd certainly like to move this quickly as possible and get it right, but I would like to, I'm always uncomfortable when something ain't here, and suddenly we come tonight, we got no streets, got no nothing, we have no maps, nothing in the backup. And there was not anything, any pre-advertising, that even adding this onto our agenda. This is an item that, this is on our agenda. This is not on our agenda.
You know, look, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with Bartley. I mean, I'm willing to support moving on based on the fact I heard a lot of community input wanting that. I also heard what you guys said about the plan, you know, honoring or reflecting the historic nature of the whole district. I do share some of your concerns about, is there a risk that we're gonna forget something or miss something? In terms of, you mentioned earlier that if you looked at it more time, maybe this would need a little tinkering with the zoning. But, all in all, in terms of moving along.
Again, I say to you as the committee members, there is nothing that prohibits us from coming back in and looking at a plan amendment. If there's something, if you took action tonight to incorporate this, and there was something that we came back to you 6 months from now and said we want a modification associated with that.
You know, to hear that's good. Are you going to be looking at this?
I think we will be looking at that.
Can I ask you a question? If the committee were to adopt, again, I don't have a vote here, but I will on Tuesday, so if the committee were to adopt the amendment and move it all to the full council, would you be able to provide more detailed back? I know it's Thursday night. Would you be able to provide more detailed backup?
In terms of,
What goes out?
in terms of, in what's
The amendment, the
backup would you be looking for?
expanded area, whatever maps and things like that, what we're doing.
Well, I mean, we have a map of the area, we know what the area is. I think you know, in terms of what we went over, you all, as elected officials of Norwalk, know the area that we're talking about.
Okay.
But certainly we can provide you with a street map.
Anything.
But not with the regulations or no?
I went to Google Maps, took the outlined area, and just kept blowing it up, so I've seen all the streets, and I would think you would do the same things, and you capture all the streets.
I'm not, I know the area too, I mean, trust me, that's not the issue as much as that the way government's supposed to work and to be open, all right, this should have at least had some airing and not just being, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, just suddenly added out of the blue to something because. I also understand the issue of timing and trying to get this done in a timely fashion. My whole concern has always been pretty much the way I've believed in things, that I get concerned with something just tossed in. It's one thing if you said tonight, which I would totally agree with that, we should take up this next meeting. In the meantime, let's adhere to that and put this together. I'm just saying, but this, add this on as an amendment without even supporting document, not even being on the agenda as a proposed amendment, gives me concern. So, so I'm just saying, I will support the TOD document, but I can't support the amendment.
Okay.
At this time.
Look, no, this is a committee, it's not the full council. We can have further discussion on this very issue Tuesday night with the full council, and we can amend, if necessary, we amend it out. We amend it back to where you're more comfortable. Why don't we let the full council have a bite at it and see where we want to go. I am concerned personally about the timelines and consequences of not acting, or how long it will take to do X versus Y, and that kind of issue. I'd also like to hear a little bit more from the public on it, perhaps. But remember, this is just committee, and by sending it to the full council, we're giving all 15 council members a chance to listen to each other and make a decision about the actual amendment. And I think we're pretty much behind the TOD plan. But I would have, if I had a vote, I would have no trouble sending it to the council with the full understanding that we may have to send it back to the committee, or if there are just too many questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, I guess the procedure was, I guess, now we voted on the amendment, and that was unanimous, am I correct?
No,
take a vote.
We haven't voted on the amendment. That was,
Oh, we didn't.
and that's what called discussion.
Okay.
So read the amended language again.
Okay, the amendment language is approved advancing the COD district redevelopment plan and the recommended zoning to the common council. All in favor?
Are you, you amend, you have to amend the TOD plan, otherwise that's not included.
To include,
No, I think what
I know.
he's saying is that you're amending the TOD plan to incorporate the additional area. So,
yeah, this is a little complicated here.
The motion is to, for this here.
Right.
I mean, I think you can say as reflected in the attached map.
Okay. Approve the advancing TOD as to redevelopment plan with recommended zoning in the common council,
No, I think
reflected to the,
if I'm not mistaken, you're saying that you need to amend the TOD plan that's in front of you for
include the
consideration to
attached map.
include that,
So
then
that's
you have to
that's
take
an
action on the TOD
amendment
plan.
to the action you're asking, because the action that's on our agenda is this.
is the plan itself.
And
So
you're
it's-
looking to amend it to add that. So the amendment is to add that.
Okay, yeah, to add the
So that's
additional
amendment by
area
itself. Okay.
as specified in the map. Okay, all in favor? All right, 4 no, against, opposed?
For these-
Okay. All right, so that passes. So now we're doing the action item for the TOD, correct? Is that what we're doing?
The as amended TOD.
As amended TOD plan. Someone like to move that? Mr. Sims, all in favor? Against, opposed?
I'm gonna abstain because of the amendment till I get some more information.
Okay, and 1 extension. Okay, great.
Don't like me, fine.
So I got a motion to adjourn?
Can I have that? 'Cause I got to do
Move
that
it.
for the,
Thank you, Mr. Livingston.
council agenda tomorrow.
All in favor? All right.
I'm supposed to make it.
Oh, yeah, it's not right, John.